Hi everybody, and welcome to Seeking the Sacred Earth. This is the first in a series on inner child work. I'm going to start with discussing the polarity of narcissism and codependence. So when we are in utero, we are like this clay, energetic clay, being molded. And in utero, we begin to be molded. Our first moldings are from how our mother is feeling, what she's experiencing. Our mold picks up on that. And when we're born, this is when the world starts to mold us. Our relationships with our parents start to mold us. Every moment of our life is molding this energetic clay. There are certain developmental stages in life. And if those developmental stages aren't met, our mold starts distorting. And even more so if we have trauma, loss, many circumstances that we could say are painful, and we don't have adults in our life to help us heal them and work through them, then those wounds, traumas, and pain become like trapped, frozen energy pustules in our energy clay. As we grow, those trapped places will create havoc in our life. From my research and work with psychologists and energy healers and shamans, what this idea of the narcissist and codependent polarity really speaks to is when the child is wounded and it's not resolved, it's not healed in that developmental stage in which it's wounded, that inner child in the adult then is attracting, chaos and more of that pain into its life. And there's basically two extremes of how that's handled in adulthood. One is narcissism, and one is codependency, or also called codependents are also called empaths in certain circles. Both of these polarities are dealing with the same wound. Both of this adult manifestation, the codependent and the narcissist, both are dealing with wounded inner child, the child that was not aided in healing its trauma when the trauma happened. The narcissist, let's speak about this. And remember, this is a polarity. They can't exist without the other. So, in the healing communities, we tend to really vilify the narcissist. And like I said, the codependent is sometimes called the empath. But in a culture that is rife with this kind of technology, we live in a narcissistic society. None of us can claim that we don't have narcissistic tendencies. And I think that then it's also true that we all then have these codependent tendencies. So it's important that we understand both polarities so that we can live somewhere in the center and be truly aware of what we're attracting in our relationships and in our life. So the narcissist adult is the child that when the trauma happens, and there could be multiple traumas or even just one, when these trauma happens, the narcissist builds a wall around it, pushes it down as deep as they can. It is pushed so deep that adult doesn't even really know it's there. Their true inner self, that inner child, is lost to them. And that's why when we talk about the narcissist or the cluster B personalities, these are people who are not able to have empathy for other people because they're actually not connected to their inner child or their heart or their feeling center, because they've had to cut off because the pain was too much to bear. They didn't have adults around them to help them through it when it was happening. So they build like this, wall of ice and rock around their inner child. But the inner child is still in there. Remember that point. Narcissist. The codependent, right? They both, same wounds, inner child wounding. The codependent doesn't necessarily build a wall around their inner child and its pain. What ends up happening is that inner child becomes, the forefront of the personality in the adult. The people-pleasing, trying to make everybody happy, really focused on others and not in themselves. There's, you know, a really good thing to do is Google both narcissism and codependency and see like which buzzwords sort of connect to you the most, because there's so much information on this. But why I talk about it and why I think it's important is because a lot of people say that narcissistic people can't change. And a lot, you know, the codependent is sort of given, I guess, more graces in a way because, you know, they're the people pleaser. But like I said, in reality, I think we all have this polarity, and probably in each relationship we have in our life, we are on some place on this line, if not in either extreme. So it's important that we discuss these things. I'm going to give some testimony about my own experience with these polarities. I grew up in a strife-ridden household. There was drama, chaos, and a lot of what we would call, you know, abusive scenarios. And I did not have adults who were able to help me through any of it, mainly because they were going through their own version of hell. And there was no vocabulary to help me through it. It was, you know, sort of every man for themselves, and let's just move on and get through this and try to survive. There were so many extremes to the level of what I survived that I can really look back and have a lot of compassion for the young girl who went down, like, not going to deal with this. I have to act like this never happened. And I pushed down this pain and trauma as deeply as I could. And I was good at it. I was really good at it. But what that created was a lot of narcissistic tendencies. You can ask, you know, the people I went to Juilliard with, they have a ton of stories of where they could just say, yeah, it just seemed like she did not care about how anybody else felt. You know, my 20s were really rife with this. There's a lot of men in my life. I ended relationships, and it probably seemed to them like I did not care about how they felt. There are a lot of scenarios in my life where I've had to forgive myself for my narcissistic tendencies. And the way I was able to forgive myself is understanding that, in truth, I was doing the best I could to suppress the pain that I had not dealt with, that I had no help to deal with. Around 2012, you know, that act of suppression, I mean, this is the thing. Your body, your adrenal system, your endocrine system, your brain, literally, it can't handle all the energy it takes to suppress the wounded inner child, right? That inner child is eternal. You can't put it to sleep. You can't kill it. It is, you know, that underlying form that was in utero that your whole mold grows from. It is your central core. So I got really sick in 2012. My endocrine system stopped functioning. I developed an autoimmune disorder. I mean, my body was saying, deal with this now, or you're going to have some huge illness to deal with. You know, what do you want? You want to be sick, or do you want to heal? And I made a choice to heal and do whatever it took to reclaim my inner child and not allow the trauma and abuse of the past to define me, but kill me. Was not going to allow it to kill me. And it was in this moment, there was a very clear decision that I truly believe I blew up the wall, and my inner child was able to start coming through. And I was able to start systematically, specifically healing those moments where she had no help, where she was, you know, what we can call victimized. But in the end, these things have become my greatest strength, so I don't feel like a victim anymore. You know, from that moment, when my heart was broken open, literally, things really changed for me. And I was able to see the pain that I had caused people in my past. And I was able to make many amends and bridge a lot of, you know, wounded connections. And a lot of people in my life, I realized, were, you know, knights in shining armor all that way through. But I kind of swung to another side, which was now that the inner child was out and no longer like caged, then there was a whole nother aspect to deal with, which was this fury to make up for time lost, this wanting to help other people so desperately who may be in my situation in the past, and some saw it, some didn't see it, and how can I help them? And this rescue mentality kicked in. And I had to then deal with the patterns of codependency, where other people's problems, in some ways, I would put before mine. And in a way, I had to admit that I was doing that because maybe I needed a break from all this intense inner work that I was doing. The point of all of this is to say, we all have the core heart-based energy within us that we call the inner child. And all of our inner child, there's no way to be born in this modern age and avoid trauma and pain and discomfort. And there's no way that all of us had healthy, self-aware parents or teachers who were going to be able to help us through all of that. We have to forgive our parents and our communities and our society at large. But we really are onto something now. We are in a collective awakening, and it's a chaotic but beautiful time. And there is so much information on our internet that both keeps us in a narcissistic cycle, but can also help us break these cycles and bring awareness to our pain. So the first thing I would start to say that as we go into this inner child work is just to leave this video thinking about where you may be on the spectrum today, because we're probably a different place on this spectrum of narcissism and codependency in each different relationship in our life. I mean, the idea, we always want to stay in the middle, in that place of balance. And that takes a lot of awareness, and that takes a dedication to the intention to get there and be there. So I challenge you to form this intention today, to be in the center of this polarity. And the only way we can do that is by acknowledging that inner child. So take a journal, sheet of paper, an open Word document, and spend a little time thinking and writing about what your inner child may be holding on to. And where is that inner child in that, form of energetic clay? Is it in an ice wall? Is it in a cage? Is it, excuse me, is it running your life? Is it, running rampant, trying to avoid working on itself by working on other people? It's an interesting task to take. It's a path for sure. And I do believe this is a spiritual path, because in the end, when we couldn't call on the adults around us, we have to be that mother, father, teacher to that inner child now. And I found that the really only way to do that is to have a real connection to a higher power myself. Someone that, an entity. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at this. We call it God, we call it infinite spirit, creator. There's, religions are created around this idea. It's just important to have that as we go through this work, because definitely there are days when it can be disheartening when you realize how you've neglected yourself, or how neglecting yourself has hurt other people. So we are going to dissolve this polarity, and we're going to live in the center. And, just be careful as you're researching this, because I do encourage you. The narcissists get a really bad rap, and we're leaning towards, the codependence being the good one. But we are both of these things. That polarity goes like this. You can't have one without the other. And we are all one great giant being, so we can't disconnect from this. Whew. hope you all had a cup of tea during this one. Pardon the coughing. I need to get my own cup of tea. Thank you so much for viewing this, and please share it if it helps. This was Inner Child, the narcissistic codependency spectrum of polarity, and I look forward to making the Inner Child Part 2, where we'll really get into some techniques as to how to really work with the inner child, to love it, and to create harmony with it so that it is our ally and no longer angry at us and everyone else for not helping it when it was traumatized. Thanks so much, you guys. Bye.